Hey everybody, sorry I had to find my mic audio and I just realized I am not sharing Bent's camera, which is a production error, so I'll take a drink for that and I'll fix that. I don't know if people know, but there were uh technical problems going on the entire time that this has been going. And yeah, basically I only figured out what the heck was going on seconds before we went live. Actual seconds. Ben can attest that I was like, alright, we just got to the right place, and there were like 3 seconds left in the yeah, so yeah, Ben is here now. We have a 200 Argentinian peso super chat, so thank you very much for that. That, of course, is from, let me pull up my actual viewer activity here. Domesticated Oldness of the Jews Python for 200 Argentine pesos says, it was the best of cunt, it was the worst of cunt. Ironically, these things aren't too far apart. Well, hopefully, that doesn't get me, was it YouTube angry at me? I am once again back here in my Starfleet uniform. We're going to set up a new goal for the Starfleet uniform. We're going to say if we can get 30 super chats in the next 2 hours or teal or higher, I'll be back in uniform next week. All right. So, Bent.
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I am a little flustered with you saw me scrambling. It was a little hectic. Yeah. I came close to not starting on time. And technically that is not his name actually. There was I did recently read a story about, like, I think it was YouTube who banned a guy because, or no, it might have been Twitch. I don't know. It was one of the streaming platforms, and they banned a guy because when he gave his address to, like, monetize it or something, he was from Gaytown, except that's actually where he was from. It was like a little town of like 180 people, and they were like, "You can't just tell us you're from Gaytown. That's not real." And he was like, "But it is real." And so he's like, "Look up my my postal code and everything. That's where it is." And they're like, "No." Eventually, they did straighten it out, but, like, yeah, that was a weird thing. Anyway, so we are first. Bent, do you have anything you want to say before we launch off?
I have a bunch of thank yous to give out. A lot of thank yous. A bunch of people got me things from my Amazon wish list, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you, Timothy in chat. I think I know who that is. Joshua Geese, Stephanie Park, Prixie Purple, and 2 separate gifts from Anonymous. Thank you all so much. It means a lot to me.
And now you have, like, months worth of food, huh?
I have a lot of food, yes.
Well, you know, we do. A while. If we can get you up high enough, we can still get Bent gets free pizza. That's still on the table, despite all this other food that you've been getting.
Nice.
So
I love food.
Food is I do too. I'm a pretty big fan.
Yeah.
All right. So we are here. If you are new, to do Kent with Bent, which is where I drink. I'm right now drinking a little somewhat ersatz mojito. And Bent, what are you drinking?
I have a Mountain Dew Baja Blast in this glass right here.
Nice.
It's very good.
All right. And so we do that while we debunk or sometimes just sort of laugh at Kent Hovind because he's extremely dumb. And basically the theme for Tuesday, if you're new, is we just take the absolute, like, bottom of the barrel creationist trash, and then I, along with often a co-host, drink a little bit and debunk it in live. And so we do in fact have a drinking game, which originally we didn't, but hey, we do now. And so we'll go through the rules. Ben, do you have them pulled up to make sure I don't forget any?
Yes, I do.
All right, so one of the ones you already saw was Dapper's a Professional. This one is activated anytime I screw up the production. If it's just a technical difficulty, then we don't take a drink for it. Like, for instance, if this media player were to, say, crash, or YouTube took down the stream as a result of, like, their servers going offline or something, that doesn't count. But if it's like me forgetting to put Bent on screen, which isn't a technical problem, that's just me forgetting. Even if it is me forgetting because of dealing with other technical problems, that still counts. Or if I forget to unmute Bent or something like that, then that counts. But we'll also take a drink if Kent Hovind says something that's so stupid we just kind of have to, because we need like some brain coolant. We will also take a drink anytime Kent Hovind gets something factually correct that's not just him quoting something else, right? So if he actually has the idea in his brain, and he speaks it aloud, and he's not quoting anyone, and he's right, we'll take a drink for that. We'll also take a drink anytime Kent Hovind tells a joke that doesn't land, or tells a story that didn't happen. We'll also take a drink anytime he mentions, you know, the 1930s and 40s mustache man from Germany, or his political party that he found, well, not founded so much as, like, led? I don't know. Yeah, we'll take a drink for that. Or their various other, you know, infamous activities. Or if he mentions modern incarnations of them, we'll take a drink for that. We'll take a drink if Kent Hovind cites a source, and we check the source, and the source not only fails to confirm what he's saying, which of course it will, unless it's a creation source, but if it actively contradicts him, then we take a drink for that, and we call that a Trojan source. And there has been some, not controversy, but debate as to how that came about on the channel, and I do think that I was alerted that someone said it in chat, and then I adopted that, and I do think that sounds correct. I don't remember very well, so please forgive me for that. Yeah. So let's see. By German guy with a mustache, you mean Nietzsche, right? Well, was he a big political guy in the 1930s and 40s? I feel like he wasn't. Anyway, we'll also take a drink if Kent Hovind mixes up what we can learn about, say, Lucy, the specimen of Homo erectus, with what we can learn about her broader genus as a result of, you know, like, other fossils and whatnot. So, for instance, if he says, like, oh, well, we can't know what Lucy's, say, foot morphology looked like because we didn't have her feet in the fossil. Yeah, well, we have other Australopithecus feet, so yes, we can. That's going to be called a, what do we call it? Ad hominid. We can only get one of those per stream because once it happens once, it just kind of keeps happening. We will also take a drink if either Bent or I can successfully predict what Kent Hovind is going to say as an argument next, which it doesn't happen all that often, but it does happen. Well, there are also a number of ways you guys can trigger drinks. So, for instance, if you super chat anything to the effect, or membership milestone chat, to the effect that A answers in Genesis, that's AIG or a bag of dicks, we'll take a drink. We will take a drink for each gifted membership, which, by the way, yeah, I have double checked, and we are pretty far away for another emoji because of the reduction in memberships as a result of YouTube changing who gets memberships to be way crappier. So I don't blame you guys for not bothering to engage with that as much. Okay. Thanks. My computer is still giving me trouble. I can't talk.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm very happy about this. Anyway, we'll also take a drink if Mothra or Godzilla come by audibly, or if anyone super chats or membership milestone chats anything with any of our kaiju emoji, of which we have 3: Godzilla, King Ghidorah, and Mothra. And what am I missing, Bent?
That's all of them. You got every last rule.
Awesome. All right. Well, unless anyone else has something else to add, I think it may be time for us to actually start listening to Kent, although we do want to give a quick, like, what was Kent on about last time? So last time he was complaining about Hugh Ross being an old Earth creationist who believes in a local and not a global flood. Now, Hugh Ross does this for a number of reasons, primarily because he wants to keep the Bible story as realistically plausible as possible. And so he wants to exclude as many obviously impossible things as possible. Kent says that it's all about the geological column, and I don't think that that's actually true. I think that that he is much more convinced by the cosmological indications of old age for the universe. But whatever. And Kent also just recently, very incorrectly, defined Mesopotamia as basically everything from Israel to like the eastern edge of Persia, which isn't even close to right. That includes Mesopotamia. But it's sort of like saying Canada is anything like west of Portugal. Like, no, it's not. It is west of Portugal, I'll give you that, but it's not everything west of Portugal. There's a lot of other places in there that aren't Canada. So yeah, it's a little weird like that. Joshua Geese has gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you very much. We will take 5 drinks. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Team ONB Formula One Dog Racing says, I thought Erica got a Gibbon propose it here. I don't think that's correct. I mean, it's possible. Look, I don't strongly remember where I got it. So, like, I guess that's possible. That doesn't sound right, though. Because I'm pretty sure it was after Eric with Erica had to sort of end because she was getting way too busy. But anyway, here is more Kent.
You're wrong, okay? Get right with God on that topic. Okay. If the Earth...
That's one of those weird things, like, get right with God on that topic. I don't know what that means, right? Because when it comes to, like, theological positions within Christianity, I don't think that there are a whole lot of topics like that where, like, theologically God is supposed to care about that, right? Like, I don't know. It just seems weird to me. I always thought that the main thing about Christianity was supposed to be, like, you know, the salvific work of Jesus on the cross and in the grave and resurrected and all that jazz, which is not this. So yeah, I don't know. But Naramda puts has just gifted another Dapper Dinosaur membership, so we'll take a drink for that. Thank you very much. All right. And I want to double check, did I set the... Yes, I did set the super chat goal correctly. Okay, just wanted to double check. All right, here we go.
reduced this 12-inch globe like this one, all the waters in the oceans would not even fill 1 tablespoon. I knew I figured it out, the data here.
Okay.
Today, the oceans average 12,000 feet deep. If the Earth were smooth, water would be 8,000 feet deep, 1.5 miles everywhere.
Okay.
The average height of the land, and here we are, what, 60 feet above sea level, right where I think my house is maybe 60 or 70 or 80 feet above sea level in Pensacola.
Probably a little bit less now, but, you know.
The average height, if you took all of the mountains, Himalaya mountains, Rocky mountains, all of them, if you averaged out all the land above sea level, it'd be 2,600 feet. Oceans average 12,000 feet deep.
So part of the problem with this, though, is that we know that there's no good reason to suspect that the relief of the Earth was significant, of the, well, the solid portions of the Earth, crust of the Earth, was significantly lower in the deep past, right? Because we have the remains of once extremely tall mountains, right? Like Himalaya level tall. For instance, the Atlas Mountains, the Scottish Highlands, and the Appalachian Mountains in North America. What all of those are the remnants of the like Central Pangean mountain range, which, based on the geology of it, and comparing it to, say, the geology of other uplifted mountains like the Himalayas, was probably significantly taller than the Himalayas. So, like, we have really, really good reason to think that that was never the case. And when it comes to things like ocean trenches and whatnot, we know how those form, and we have no good reason to think that those weren't around in the past. And you can say, well, what about mid-ocean ridges? Well, okay, we don't have as good a record of ancient mid-ocean like ridges like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, where the two plates are spreading apart. But we also don't have any good reason to think that they didn't exist in the past. So Kent is going to try to use this whole, like, what if the total relief in the solid parts of the crust was just lower? That would raise the effective volume of water on, or like how high the water would get on versus continental shelves and whatnot. And there'd just be more water for a flood. Well, that presents 2 problems. One, if you're going to say that was how the pre-flood world was, well, where did people live? Because if there's enough water to flood the Earth, well, then that's a problem. Of course, he's saying it came in from space, but we'll get to that if he comes back with that. And 2, it presents the other problem of, like, well, that's not how anything is described. I mean, the Bible says that there were high hills and mountains, and it also doesn't describe any of the physical evidence. So, like, we have lots of reasons to think that this just isn't much of a thing. Gatubello for $2 says, Contesta e Genesis ta un tas di dolo, which I recognize that as looking like a Romance language, but which one? Who knows? But I do understand it, so let's take a drink. It's a weird experience, sometimes seeing a sentence that you understand and not knowing what language it's in anyway. It is a strange thing. Reminds me of that one time that, for some reason, Catalan was the best Wikipedia article for a particular topic. So I had to struggle through reading Catalan to figure out what the heck was going on with the subject I was interested in. That was weird. It was like something like some random bird or something. I don't know.
So if you draw that out on graph paper, 2,600 and 12,000, there's no comparison. There's plenty of water to flood the Earth. Skeptics say, well, where'd you get all the water to flood the world? Well, they're looking at it today thinking you have to cover Mount Everest. You don't have to cover Mount Everest. You have to push Mount Everest down, and everything gets covered.
Look, I would be okay with granting that maybe Mount Everest wasn't quite as high, but you have to basically plane off like all surface detail on the Earth in order to make this plausible with the water we have around now. And we, like I said, we know that that's not the case, right? Like, Ben, you ever been to the Appalachians?
No.
Oh, thought maybe you had.
No, I never made it there.
Oh. Well, I have. And there's this thing that they do that some of you might have heard of. It's called existing. That is a thing that they do. That on its own kind of precludes this entire idea. So, oops. Sorry, Kent, that, you know, a big swath of the country you live in kind of debunks everything about this. Oh, well. Can't really hear Kent much. Okay, let me see what I can do about that. He is at full audio. Let's see. See if I can boost his audio a little bit. See what we can do. Let me know how this is, and I might have to turn Bent down.
When they climbed Mount Everest, 1953, Edmund Hillary, first one that we know of, at least to get to the top, when they got to the 26,000-foot level. Now, Mount Everest is 29,028 feet tall. At about 26,000 feet, they began to find petrified clams, seashells. I've got buckets of them here in our museum. These petrified clams are interesting. They're closed.
Okay, so a few things. A lot of those aren't clams. They are, in fact, a different kind of shelled organism called a brachiopod. So this doesn't do much to the argument, right? Because if you said, well, they found brachiopods on Mount Everest, okay, that's still something that requires an explanation just as much as, say, finding bivalves on Everest, right? Like, that's still a thing that we should probably want an explanation for. So, sure, that's just Kent not knowing the difference. Second, a lot of the things that he will show pictures of and cite as, like, 11-foot clams or whatever are actually just concretions. A concretion is a particularly hard kind of sedimentary rock where sediment starts to form around the nucleus of some, like, hard object, and then layers upon layer form around that, and they can be particularly hard, which means that they when, say, the side of a sedimentary formation starts to erode out, the concretions stay, like, whole. They don't erode as quickly, and so sometimes you can actually just find them scattered in places. So a lot of them are just concretions, and concretions often contain fossils, but they don't have to, and obviously the fossils are going to be smaller than the concretion. So there's that. And second, we'll get to why there are, marine organisms in Everest when he first makes the claim that they shouldn't be there without a flood, because I'm sure he will.
How many have been to the beach in Pensacola? You can walk along the beach and find seashells by the zillions, right?
I mean, yeah, it's a beach, Kent. I'll take a drink. I mean, he's right. Not wrong.
You hardly ever find a matched pair, and you never find them closed. If it dies, it...
Casual Sleeping Dragon says, so like the rock equivalent the rock equivalent of a pearl? Yeah, basically. All right, so remember, he's just saying if a clam dies, it opens.
Opens.
Okay. Okay, so, Bent, have you been to the beach before?
Yes, I have.
Okay. How many live clams did you find walking along the sands of the beach?
None.
Okay. Now, you might not know this, but there were actually probably a lot of live clams at the beach.
Hmm.
So if you didn't find any, but they were there, any idea where they might be?
Were they buried under the sand?
Yes, they in fact bury themselves under the sand, because that is often where they live. In fact, if you are very careful, if you watch the water come in, as it starts to go back out, sometimes you'll see little bubbles come up. And if you're quick and you dig right where the bubble is, often what you'll find is a bivalve, or a clam, or something like that, right? Well, clams are bivalve. In fact, last time I was in South Carolina, I did that with my nephew. We went to the beach, and the whole family went to the beach, obviously. And in addition to waiting way too long to finally beat him at chess, because he just learned how to play chess and was really bad at it, but wanted to play, and I kept offering him, like, checkmate opportunities all over the place, and he wouldn't take them, so eventually I beat him. But then, after that, we went and I taught him how to find little tiny clams at the beach. And so that was a lot of fun. But the thing is, though, what if a clam dies under the sand? It might relax the muscle that holds the shell closed, but then what? It's still under sand. So the only shells that you find on the top of the beach are the ones where the clam has been dug up at some point. And then, yeah, it's going to open, and it's probably going to get eaten, and then you're going to find a half clamshell. But there are also plenty of dead clams that you're not going to find strolling along the beach, because they're underground. That's it. That's all it takes to explain a dead clam in the closed position that gets fossilized. Right? And what more perfect situation for a clam to be fossilized than dying underground already? And what can cause a clam to die underground? It might just dig too deep. Or, like, maybe a rock falls on top of its burrow and it can't burrow out. Because they're not great at burrowing out. They mostly want to burrow down. Mixie says, ooh, I can hear Bent really well. Alright, well, that's good. All right, well, I guess we have that figured out then.
Nice.
Thank you. Oh, and I have to update. I haven't updated. Because we're only at 8%, Ben. I think we need to get to like 97 or 98 or something to get you free pizza.
It's possible.
It's
Anything
possible.
could happen.
It's true. Anything could happen. All right, so. Ray Elgatubello says, Repostos en genesi es una bossa de pixes. And I, again, don't know which language we're going for, so I have no idea how badly I slaughtered that, but we'll take a drink. And update the counter. Oh. Ben needs to get more screen time than Kent. I mean, they have the same amount of screen time, because they're both on screen. Alright, so with the first super chat that actually counts towards the super chat goal, which is getting me back in this hot, stupid uniform here that doesn't fit very well, we've got Domesticated Oldness of the Jews Python for 100 Argentinian pesos, saying, I was the best of cunt, it was the worst of cunt. Ironically, those things aren't too far apart. Mothra, with... You know what, I'll give you the Mothra. It didn't quite work, but I'll take a drink for it anyway. Thank you very much. And I will update this as well. And also, Wayne Rossi, who's been a member for 23 months, says, the clams delve too greedily and too deep. Yes. Indeed. Oh, that was Catalan. Okay, Catalan. Yeah, see, I don't actually recognize it by sight. But if I take the time, I can read through it if I have, like, the patience. And I'm gonna miss subtleties, right? Because I'm gonna get, like, grammatical forms wrong and whatnot. So, like, I'm probably gonna not notice when it switches to, like, future tense or something. But I'll get the gist. Anyway. I just forgot where I was. Oh, clams, right. So, yeah. Now, Kent is gonna say the only way clams can die in a closed position is by some kind of catastrophic event. And while it is true that a catastrophic event could cause that, it's not the only thing that can cause it. And we'll talk about why there are clams there when he gets the must have been a flood.
Very frequently, you find the seashells have a hole drilled in them. How many have seen that before?
That's usually a feeding mark from an echinoderm, so like a sea star. Or starfish, if you want to use that term. Or it could be from a snail. Snails can also do that. Actually, I believe snails are more typical because they have radulas that they can use to drill in. For 200 Argentinian pesos, domesticated oldness of the Jews says, I meant to say, Dapper, I should let my nephew win. I don't want him to get discouraged. Dapper's nephew, I should let Uncle win. It can't be easy for him to move the pieces with those little arms. We were using a tablet. We didn't even have pieces. All I had to do was click. But no, I tried so hard to let that kid win. And then eventually it was just like, all right, I have to eventually end this game. I don't want this game to go until all we have is kings left after dozens of turns. So eventually I just moved for a check that I knew he'd probably fall into a trap for. And he moved whatever piece, I don't remember. I was like, all right, checkmate. He was like, oh. So I'm like, that means I won. Hey, let's do other beach thing, which that wasn't even much of a beach thing. Rail got $2 for $2 says, I'm never seeing a Patrick Star the same way again. Oh, here's even more gross things. Unlike most bilaterians, starfish or sea stars don't actually have a through gut. They just have a dead-ended stomach. And in order to eat, they actually invert their stomach and surround whatever they want to eat with their stomach, and then release stomach acids and digestive enzymes until that's, well enough dissolved that they can just scoop it up and pull their stomach back in. And then when they're done digesting any waste material afterwards, they just shoot out of their mouth again. So imagine if you had to eat by vomiting up your entire stomach, surrounding your food with it, starting to slowly digest it outside of you, sucking your stomach back in, and then vomiting up whatever was left after you were done eating.
Sounds terrible.
Yeah, well, fortunately, they don't have brains, so they don't have to worry about it too much. Yeah, and I was wrong. Yeah, I was wrong about the whole. That is more of a snail thing. Sea stars do open bivalves by sheer brute force. They just kind of stick their stomach in. So yeah, snail feeding marks is what I'm thinking of. A snail, which is not a starfish.
There's a special animal that grabs these clams and with his tongue, I believe.
It's a radula, which is similar to a tongue, so I'm not going to be like all nitpicky. But do know it is in fact a radula. Oops.
Drills a hole, sucks the clam out. Involuntarily. And
yes, Kent, that's true. The clams don't volunteer for this position.
As soon as the clam dies, of course, the shell opens up. He relaxes. You very rarely find a matched pair, and you never find them closed if they're dead. And yet all over the world...
It's just not true. Just take a drink. That's just not true.
Petrified clams are found closed and petrified. What would that indicate?
That they died while under sediment. That's it. Which is, again, where many of them live in the first place.
Buried alive or frozen. Probably buried alive. Underwater landslides.
I like the frozen idea. I like the idea that Kent might find it plausible that the ocean would freeze solid to the point that bottom-dwelling clams would actually freeze in place. To be fair to Kent, though, he is actually saying, well, it's probably more like getting buried fast, which is indeed much more plausible.
A clam doesn't appear to be too bright. When they panic or something's happening strange in their environment, they clam up. That's where the word comes from. Okay, they clam up. Shut up.
Okay, is he trying to imply that clams are named after the action of clamming up, or that clamming up is named after the clam?
I think he's saying the latter.
Okay, good, because that actually I'll take. Okay. I thought he was trying to say that, like, they're called clams because they clam up, which would be...
I mean, he might be saying that. I took it the other way.
All right, I'll take it that way,
give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, that's fair.
Shut the door, till everything goes away, and then we'll see what happened, okay? Well, if they all clam up and they get buried in a mudslide, they can't open. And they're going to petrify closed. I've got buckets of them here on the shelves. I will show you some later. In some places, they're 10 feet thick. A guy from
My Unfinished Journey for 222 says, Hail Nero, Daps, and Bent, and hail acclaimed clams. And then Rail Got You Bella for $2 says, the clam is brighter than Kent Hovind. Thank you very much, and yes, that is true. All right, here we go.
Opp, Alabama, up the road here. How far is Opp? 120 miles, maybe 150, whatever. He called me one day and said, Brother Hovind, do you need some more petrified clams for your museum? I said, yeah. Why, do you have some? He said, yeah, they're 4 feet thick in my backyard. Every time he rototills for his garden, he brings up thousands of petrified clams. We were in Texas, in Glen Rose, seeing the footprints there, walking up and down the valleys and the hills around Glen Rose, Texas.
So in case you don't know, Glen Rose is also the location of the supposed man tracks. If you watch Knowing Better, he not that long ago put out a fairly extensive video about the Glen Rose man tracks and the history of their discovery, forgery, the shenanigans that went on with creationists afterwards. And there are two kinds of man tracks at Glen Rose. There are faked ones that are just carvings, and there are ones where people who don't know what they're looking at are looking at dinosaur footprints and thinking they're human footprints. Now, to be fair, they do not look like the typical dinosaur footprints that you would imagine, which is why people get confused by them. So it's not like they're looking at like the three-toed Tyrannosaurus footprint from like Jurassic Park that was just made in the mud. I mean, like, that's a human. They're smaller dinosaurs. The toe marks have largely been filled in with mud, and the mud itself was thick enough that the metatarsals were leaving imprints instead of just the toe pads and the tarsal and the phalanges. So, like, it's not as silly as it seems, but yeah, it's pretty silly. And there, basically every single creationist organization, with the exception of basically Kent Hovind and Carl Baugh, have said no. There's no good evidence of man tracks at Paluxy. These are dinosaur tracks and fakes. You shouldn't use this as evidence of humans and dinosaurs living together. So those are the tracks that he's talking about at Paluxy. Because remember, Kent Hovind wouldn't care about just random old dinosaur tracks. But man tracks with dinosaur tracks, now that would be interesting for him.
And there are huge petrified clams, closed, in the middle of Texas, near Dallas. Well, Dallas is a little ways from the beach, first of all. And these clams...
I mean, it is now, but it wasn't in the Cretaceous. In the Cretaceous, that part of Texas was in fact underwater, because the world was significantly warmer, and the water levels were significantly higher. And yeah, there was actually a beach that goes up Texas, across like Louisiana and Mississippi, and then down across Georgia. In fact, to this day, you can see that shoreline in geography maps, as well as in where certain crops are grown, because the different kinds of rock that were deposited tend to then lend themselves to better growing for different crops. And so basically where rice is able to be grown in the southern United States follows along the contours of this ancient Cretaceous beach. So yes, it is in fact not close to the ocean today, but it was in the Cretaceous. Mixie for $2 says, the worst fakes ever. Thank you very much, and I will update the counter. All right, here we go.
Are huge. Of course, everything's bigger in Texas, you know how it goes. But they find these petrified clams literally all over the world. I have people give them to me. Also, we find fossilized eggs. Now, an egg is kind of fragile.
Okay. Hey, Bent.
Yeah.
You see any of those eggs with cracks in them?
Yeah.
Yeah. So eggs are fragile, but it's probably why they broke, right?
I would guess so.
So what's the point we're trying to get here, Kent? Sean, the 21st century viewer of this channel, thank you very much, says, as a chef, I can assure you that clams can in fact die in the closed position. It's a rather annoying trait to have them stay closed after cooking. Godzilla attempt. I'll take a drink for the Godzilla attempt. Yeah, that is also a thing. They do not always open up. They typically do. It's a pretty normal thing. And also, that gets us to 10% of the way to making me wear this silly uniform.
Petrify an egg, you'd have to bury it quickly in nice, soft sediments that would later harden and preserve it.
Okay.
You can't be smashing these things around.
Okay. You are the one who talks about a worldwide flood with hundreds of feet tall tidal waves, like literally from the tides, that are churning everything up and depositing all these different layers in the span of a few months. That is the kind of burial that would crush an egg, Kent. Like, I can't emphasize enough the degree to which creationists will just say that their flood can do anything in terms of taphonomy. It can be as gentle as a feather if it needs to preserve, well, feather impressions or eggshells. And it can be a raging torrent of nonsense when it needs to shred up a bone bed so that the bones aren't articulated. Instead, you just get a graded bedding of different bones like we find in some places in, like, Montana. Which one is it, man? Is the flood a feather-soft nothing of a force? Or is it a raging torrent that can shred up a frickin' sauropod? You don't really get to have it both ways. Jake Insert Clever Dapper's inside joke here. Nelson, who's been a member for 24 months, says, Bent, do you get paid from Spotify? If so, I'm here for it. Actually, I think you're on SoundCloud. Or are you on both?
Well, bands I've been in are on Spotify. I'm not in those bands anymore. I am on SoundCloud, though. You could search Bent Hovind on SoundCloud.
Okay.
And you'll get original music.
I think I might have mistakenly said that you were on Spotify for your original stuff last Saturday. My apologies if that's what happened. SoundCloud. And do you get paid there?
No. Not that I know of. I don't think I will.
Okay. But you do get paid at your Patreon, which is linked in the description.
Yes.
So if you're interested in helping Bent out, that's definitely an option.
And
there's music there too.
Petrified eggs have been found. Genesis 7:11.
Yeah, 7-Eleven.
In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened.
Okay, I want you to look at Kent as being he prides himself on his literal reading of Genesis, right? You think he's going to be very literal with the windows of heaven?
Probably not.
No, probably not.
I think the earth cracked open because it got hit. Cracks spread around the world like an eggshell or seams on a baseball, and the water came shooting to the surface. Being hit would cause it to wobble. While it was wobbling for a few thousand years, slowly wobbling, seasons would be a little erratic.
I got bad news, though. There are 94 people watching, but only 41 of them have hit like, which means that I have to say, I like less than half of you, half as well as you deserve. And you just got bilboed. Yeah, you did. You got bilboed. So hit that like button. It really does help. My Unfinished Sock for $2 says, don't clam up, like and share the stream instead. Indeed. All right, and we will add... There we go.
And people would build temples to line up with whatever. And today the temples don't line up with the sun on summer solstice.
Okay, so a few things. One is some temples and observatories were indeed built to line up with various solar phenomena like the summer solstice or whatever. And like having the sun rise and shoot through a specific door in the temple to light up the altar or whatever. But a lot of people have claimed that about a lot of structures for which there is no evidence that they were built with celestial alignments in mind. And I'm not saying that Kent is necessarily doing that here, but a lot of people have done that and then come up with absolutely crazy dates for when the structures would have been built. We also know that at least during the last, 5 or so thousand years, the Earth hasn't been wobbling noticeably faster than it is now. because we can actually keep track of what people are saying about the stars and which star was, say, like the North Star and the precession of the equinox and whatnot. And it wasn't just wobbling. The Earth is very slowly precessing in its axial tilt. With this, I think was it like 15,000 or 20,000 or 10,000 or something years? I don't actually remember what the period is. But yeah, we know it wasn't just going crazy, and Kent using alleged celestial alignments that no longer work to try to demonstrate this. For that to be the case, there would have to be a bunch of temples that were built in a relatively short span, all of which have good evidence for having solar alignments, and then all of which are in somewhat random directions as a result of this crazy wobbling that he's talking about, because he thinks this wobbling happened when his imaginary, gigantic, super cold comet hit the Earth and somehow cooled it down, even though that's not how thermodynamics works. So, basically, Kent is taking another pseudoscience conspiracy theory, applying it to his pseudoscience conspiracy theory in a way that doesn't even make sense internally. So, dedicated oldness of the Jews Python for 200 Argentinian pesos says, AIG, ack, 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 ack. You know what, I'll take a drink for that, because that's in Martian, and Martian is definitely a real language. Thank you very much, and let's increase the counter a little bit. Because you never know, Bent. We might get to Bent gets free pizza. We're at 13% now, so it could happen.
One can dream.
Yeah. But at least this time you won't starve because of all the generous gifts from your wish list.
Oh, yeah. I'll be fed very well.
Longest or shortest day of the year. Probably for several thousand. It's still wobbling some today.
It's not wobbling today, it's precessing, and there is a difference.
Well, if it got hit at the time of the flood, 4,400 years ago, and it wobbled for, say, 2,000 years, slowly the wobble would stabilize, like a gyroscope will slowly kind of stabilize.
And we would have evidence, because we have astronomical observations going back that far. And they don't evidence some significant wobble going on 4,000 years ago. Like, that's the thing. It's not just that we have, like, physical evidence from geology. People wrote this stuff down. And while, a lot of historical works from the ancient past are of dubious reliability, these people were writing down astronomical information in order to do things like know when to plant crops. They didn't really have the option of being, like, biased about their star charts, because then they starved. Like, if the stars and getting the stars right was the difference between life and death, like it was for a lot of these people, they have a really good incentive to get it right. It's literally if your life depends on it. Like Ben, if you literally had to do a math problem, or you died, you'd probably be a lot more careful than otherwise, right?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. Kent Professional Ice Dome Miner Halstead for $4.99 says, What is that round extra-biblical contraption on his desk? That is, in fact, one of the extra-biblical globes, which is not indicated. And that reminds me, I might need to do, like, a short or something, because I am getting a little bit tired of hearing people who are generally good pseudoscience debunkers say that there is only one word for circle or sphere in Hebrew, and that explains why the circle of the earth is a phrase in Isaiah, like chapter 40. The word for ball or sphere is used earlier in Isaiah. And that's the reason that most translations translate that word as ball, and then later translate the word for circle as circle. And the last time it happened, I actually had to pull out my copy of Biblia Hebraica Stuttgarensia and, like, flip open to Isaiah and, like, take pictures of my pen pointing to the different words. So, yeah, that might be a short that I do in the coming weeks. I'd probably get Vishanti to access Halot, which is the Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament, which is something she pays to have access to, which I do not, but it is an excellent source for Hebrew vocabulary and Aramaic as well. So, yeah. Yeah, North Texas Fossils, you should do more shorts. Shorts get far, far more views. Yeah, I just hate shorts with a passion. which is why I don't do them very much. So I really, really hate them, and I wish that YouTube just didn't even have them. And also, they get way less money, is the other thing, right? I do have shorts, and the amount of money I get per view on them, even when they have thousands of views, is fractional bits of a penny.
What would the frequency of the wobble be?
Don't know. We heard last.
You would know. If you were right that one of the ways we can tell there was this wobbling was celestial alignments in temples that you can date historically, then you would know the frequency of the wobbling, because you would be able to track the location of celestial events, or sorry, the direction of celestial events from certain locations on Earth, and you could just do the math. There's no good reason for this not to be known. And even if you don't know off the top of your head, which, okay, fine, like lots of people don't know random numbers off the top of their head, right? Like, I don't know, Bent, do you remember the speed of light in miles per hour?
Not exactly.
Yeah. But like, if you had to find out, you could do it easily.
Right.
Yeah. So, Ken should know this, or at least be able to find it easily. Because this would just be a matter of plugging in the geometry and plotting it and seeing what the frequency is, right? So like, if the Earth is wobbling such that it's, got a frequency of it finishes a precession every 100 years, well, people build temples pretty often. That should be evident. You might not get it precisely, but you should be able to get the order of magnitude. Yeah, this domesticated oldness of the Jews, Python says. How would he know? He's not prepared for that. It's a good point. He is not prepared for that.
Last week, when we talked about the Australian astronomer Dodwell and the studies he did on the temples and how the Earth, he said it looks to him like something hit the Earth 350 years ago.
Yeah. See, here's the thing. He's one of those guys who goes around and is like, oh, there must be celestial alignments with everything. How far back in time do we have to go? But that's him actually using the modern rate of precession. And while he's wrong that that's how long ago those temples were built, he at least has some reason to think that he knows the frequency of this rotation. You don't, Kent. But for some reason, you're also just taking seriously his idea that these buildings were built with celestial alignments in mind. But that's not how buildings are always built. Like, I don't know, Bent, have you ever built a building with celestial alignments in mind?
I haven't.
No? Ever seen a church built with celestial alignments in mind?
No, I haven't personally.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of churches face east broadly, but that's not for a celestial alignment. That's because the traditional direction for Christian prayer is east, because that's the direction that Jesus is supposed to come back in as. The whole, like, there's a lot of stuff that goes back in there. We're not going to get into the whole biblical thing. But, like, not every temple was built with celestial alignments in mind. If you want to say a particular temple was, you have to give a reason for that.
That was his take on it, because of the wobble. Of course, the Earth is massive. I think it weighs 6 sextillion tons.
I'm not going to look that up. But sure, whatever.
So the wobble would be, you wouldn't notice it if you're on the Earth.
Each wavelength of frequency.
Yeah, probably maybe a century or scores of years. You would not notice it. You'd probably go through colder winters for a while, and then more stabilized, climate, and frequency of the wobble. Pick a number, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. The Earth today still has cracks all over it. Mid-Atlantic Ridge here is.
Also, I want to point out, if the frequency was 15 or 20 years, that would cause just absolute chaos for things like being able to grow crops. Because remember, when the precession of the Earth changes, right? Or when the direction of the spin changes, if it goes from here to say here, you've offset the seasons by 6 months. Which means that the seasons aren't coming at the same rate across that entire time, and they're not lasting the same amount of time. And different stars will be up during planting season one year than they were the next year. And the entire point of celestial alignments won't be possible if that's the case. If you knew that in 15 years, the celestial alignment would have gone 360 degrees, why would you build anything with the celestial alignment in mind? Like, think about it. So there's a famous temple in Luxor in Egypt where, I believe it's on the summer solstice, the sun shines directly down the main corridor of this temple and lights up the back of the room, and it's the only day it happens on. Okay, cool. if the next year that changed by 1/20th of a circle, so like a circle is 360 degrees, right? So that's, let's see. So we say that's let's say that's 36. So what is that going to be? What's 1/20th of 36? I don't know. I'm gonna have to open up a calculator because I don't want to do math, right? So let's see. But divided by 2 is actually really what's happening there. So yeah, that's 18 degrees. If every year the solstice was off by 18 degrees, what would be the point of making a celestially aligned building? You couldn't use it the next year. Like, that is a crazy amount of wobble. You would absolutely notice that. You might not notice it. Yeah.
Seems like an unrealistic amount of wobble.
Yeah. You might not notice with, like, your vestibular system, right? Like, you might not get dizzy because of the wobbling of the Earth's orbit. Or not orbit, but, spin. But you would absolutely notice that if you made a celestial alignment. I'm taking a drink. That's just too crazy for me. Like, even if we did it on, like, the level of a century, it would still mean that every year, the alignment of your celestial objects was drifting by 3 degrees. The sun itself, it's... Ben, help me out. It's about half a degree, right? In terms of angular size?
I'm not sure. It's a good question.
Okay. Sean, the 21st century viewer of this channel, member for 21 months, is at the Amniote level, says, does he think Westeros is real and we had a long summer? He might. So yeah, even if we say it's actually 3.6 degrees, so it's closer to 4 degrees. But like, the sun's angular size, and Bent is double checking it for me, is about half a degree if I remember correctly. So that means every single year, the location of the sun rising for, say, the solstice is going to drift by, what is that? 7 full suns worth. Which means if you have an alignment such the sun just passes through 1 year, the next year it just won't. Even if it's on a 100-year cycle. This doesn't work. If these temples were aligned for celestial events, which, again, we don't have any good reason to say that they were, but let's say they were, then that on its own precludes anything up to, like, about a 1,000-year cycle, which is too long because Kent is saying, well, it's wobbling like crazy, and that explains all the various climate craziness going on. Well, then it can't explain the celestial alignments, Kent. If every year the sun is going to drift by 7 times or more the size of the sun itself, you can't maintain celestial alignments from year to year. Oh, I missed your super chat, Roshina says. Oh, I did. I'm sorry. Yeah, Roshina for Schwarzschild Radio Star Keller for $1.99 says, big number and small number, therefore God. Yeah, basically. Rail Gatibella for $2 says, Westeros. Well, Kent does know nothing. That's true. You guys are correct. Alright. Sorry about that, Roshina. Sometimes I miss the $2 ones, especially because they don't stick around with the little label. So if I'm just not actively watching chat and they scroll by, I often don't even notice they came in. I'm sorry about that.
Giant crack in the crust of the Earth, San Andreas Fault, the Golden Fault, the Hayward Fault. I've been to many of them. I think when the Earth broke open, though, the water inside would be warmer, maybe even hot. That water comes to the surface.
Okay, but... Oh, we've already talked about this too. There is no subterranean ocean, and there physically can't be. The Earth isn't stable in that configuration, and if you had the Earth, even if it were pooped into existence with a subterranean ocean underneath a primarily granite crust, that would invert almost immediately. We're talking on like a level of days, not years or millennia, as Kent thinks. So, the fountains of the Great Deep are not some kind of subterranean ocean on the globe. They are, in fact, the way that the ancient Near Easterners imagined that water could get into the oceans from the chaos of the waters of creation outside the world that was separated from them by the dome on top and by the land and the bottoms of the ocean on the bottom. And so God or the gods could open up little gates on either end to let water in as either rain or to fill up oceans or whatever. But that doesn't work in real life. because fundamentally you cannot have a subcrustal ocean. And yeah, I suppose it would be hot since it's hot underground if you go down far enough. But so what? Physically, that cannot persist for millennia.
Surface. Well, that's going to kill the diatoms. And I'll show you a picture.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's going to kill everything else, too. Because remember, Kent is going off the hydroplate theory, which has enough heat to vaporize not just the ocean, the planet. The energy released by Walt Brown's hydroplate idea. Because remember, it doesn't just flood the planet, it also causes all the craters across the solar system. That is enough to overcome the gravitational binding energy of the planet. So, you might be aware that largely the Earth sticks together because of its own gravity. It's not really, like, physically a single object, right? So, like, if I took... I don't know, what's a good example? We'll say my mouse, right? Here's my mouse. If I put this into space, it wouldn't just break apart because of the lack of gravity, right? If I put it in deep space, right? Where there is gravity, but there's not all that much, and it's going to be in free fall for pretty much the entire time it's there, which means it's effectively in 0G. It wouldn't break apart, right? Because what's fundamentally holding this together are a bunch of, like, chemical bonds and mechanical linkages and things like that. It's primarily held together by the electromagnetic force, not gravity. But if I took a clump of dirt in my hand, that clump of dirt is primarily being held together by gravity. That's what's keeping it in a clump shape on my hand. That's why if I go like this, it'll pour off. If I were to hold that clump of dirt, take it into deep space, and then just release it, it would start to scatter apart. Now, eventually, its own self-gravity might make it come together again, but if it encounters any kind of tidal forces where the gravity over here is slightly different from the gravity over here, it's just going to disperse. That's because the ground, the Earth, the physical thing it's made of, is not primarily bound by the electromagnetic force. It's by gravity. And you can calculate how much how much force that is, and calculate what the energy would be needed to make that disperse, right? It's called the gravitational binding energy. And I don't remember exactly how to calculate what the number is off the top of my head. That's one of those things I would have to go look up. But it has been done. And when you do that check, it turns out that most flood models are hovering around or significantly surpassing the amount of energy it would take to make the Earth go all Alderaan from Star Wars style. Like, this is not a thing that's possible. So, yeah, it would kill the diatoms. It's like saying that, oh, there was a nuclear detonation. You're like, oh, man, that's going to really, really annoy the architects in that city. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Got a couple super chats. Josh Wiggies for $5 says, the diatoms, the failed offering to compete with rototoms. And then Roshina Schwarzschild Radio Star Keller for $9.99 says, Kent Hovind's theory of Earth's ejecta hitting the moon, Mars, and making Saturn's rings requires the Earth to lose a massive amount of mass. How big does Kent think the Earth was pre-flood? Yeah, I don't think he gives numbers for that, which is one of the frustrating things, right? Because we could roughly calculate that. We couldn't probably exactly calculate it because crater size is dependent on a lot of things. So you can't just say, oh, it's a 2-kilometer crater, so it was caused by something this big. Because angle and mass make up a big difference, and different substances obviously have different densities. So the same size crater could be made by different masses, and velocity is going to matter, and it's a whole thing. But it would be substantially bigger, and I don't know if he's ever given numbers. I don't think Walt Brown has given numbers either. So, yeah. All right. Well, we are right around the break time. Bent, do you feel like you need a break?
Yeah, I do.
All right. Well, in that case, we will take a quick intermission, and then we will be right back. And if you feel like it, feel free. If you do any like super chats or memberships gifting, we will still read those when we get back from the break. And then we'll give you a quick after the break message, and we will be right back to doing more Kent Hovind. And I'm going to have to find the next Kent Hovind video because we probably don't have too many weeks left of this particular Kent Hovind video. So we will see you on the other side of the break. Okay, we are back. Welcome back. We have a couple super chats to read, and I don't think we have any more gifted memberships. Nope. So, Arathamian just gave a $20 super chat that doesn't seem to have any text with it. So thank you very much. And Olivia Williams for $6.99 Beaver Buck says, this bringing up the question of on how Noah wasn't ejected to space with all this mass, or even managed to survive it with a Ghidorah, and we'll take a drink for that. And yeah, it really does bring up that question, right? Like, hey, how is that even possible? And the answer is it's not, unless it's just more miracles. But the problem for creationists is that they want this to seem plausible scientifically, right? Because they know, fundamentally, no, there was a reason that I didn't think the collar felt right. It's because it wasn't right. Sorry about that, everybody. Look at that. No one even told me that my collar was tucked inside. Ugh, Bent, I blame you for this.
I'm staring at Kent.
Alright, that's fair. Still,
Yeah.
I'm going to blame you anyway. I didn't say it was your fault. I said I'm blaming you.
You can blame me. That's okay. I'll
Okay.
take the blame.
I used to blame
Not mine.
Sphincter of Doom a lot, but he's not around much anymore, so...
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, and yeah, there just isn't an option for him to survive it. But here's the quick after the break thing, which is to say, first, hey, this channel is almost entirely supported by you guys, whether it be through super chats, donations, the Patreon, the memberships. And if you're not currently supporting financially, but you would like to, there is the Patreon link to the description, both for me and one for Bent. The join the channel button is right below this video. This thing started at like $1 or $1.99. There's a discount if you go annually on Patreon. Also, both Bent and I have wish lists linked in the description for Amazon if you just want to basically boost our happy brain chemicals. But also, if you can't afford it, or you are currently boycotting the former United States, I get both of those and will not ask you to change either of those things. Which, yeah, I'm a little bit worried about how I'm going to, do things like keep eating and paying rent. But you know what? There are bigger things than that. And I get it if you are, uninterested in sending money into this country for that reason. So, and if you are in this country, first, I don't think you should try to boycott America, because I don't see how you would. But also, hey, stay safe. Maybe buy some clothes so that you could, say, pass as a straight cis man, if possible. And get your passport. Even if it's going to have the wrong gender on it. Yep. So, yeah. If you're wondering what a straight cis man looks like, basically just get a dumpy t-shirt and some jeans, and you'll probably be most of the way there. Or a suit if you're trying to do the whole, business class guy. You do that too. But it can't fit too well. If it fits too well, you won't look straight.
Of those in a minute. This is from Walt Brown's book. Now, he has a slightly different theory called the hydroplate theory. He does not buy the ice meteor idea.
Oh, that is true. I forgot that Kent has that weird difference where they both agree that there's these subterranean oceans, but Kent also has the ice comet, which he thinks is what caused all of the the rings of Saturn and the moon craters and whatnot, which would reduce the total amount of heat that the Earth would have to endure. But it still means that we're going to have many, many megatons worth of, megatons, essentially, of TNT in terms of energy being introduced to the Earth, because he has this giant meteorite, or meteor, whatever. I guess it would be meteorite after it lands, whatever. Crashing into the Earth from what's essentially just going to be, the speed that you would hit Earth if you fell from infinity, which is calculable. And it's a really high speed. So, basically we go from, vaporizing the entire planet to just vaporizing the oceans and the crust. Which, I guess it's an improvement, but,
Technically, yes.
yeah. It's would you rather have third-degree burns over 90% of your body, or only 50% of your body? It's I can answer that question, but neither one of those has a good prognosis.
He doesn't think that's correct, and he doesn't think there was a canopy before the flood.
I mean, canopy is physically impossible. So Walt Brown's probably got something going there. Because that's another thing, is that canopy would also fall, which would also cause all of that potential energy to convert into kinetic and then thermal energy, which would further cook the planet. So, you know, maybe Walt's onto something, Kent. Maybe there's a few things you're forgetting, like, you know, basic heat transfer and what energy is.
I talked for some time, a real nice guy, when I was in Phoenix, Arizona at the airport, so I called him and said, hey, I got a 3-hour layover, come on, I'll buy you lunch. So he came over and we had a wonderful time. And I love his book, In the Beginning.
I'm now thinking, I used to live in Phoenix. What would happen, what would I do if Kent Hovind said, hey, I've got a 3-hour layover, Dapper, you want to come have lunch? I feel like I wouldn't say yes, but I'm not positive. And this channel did start while I was living in Phoenix. Well, actually, no, I guess it started back when I was living in, like, Massachusetts, but only, like, 1 or 2 videos went up during that time. It really started going when I was in Phoenix. So, like, I don't know.
One of the best you'll find on creation. I encourage everybody to read that, but he differs on this. He says, the fountains of the deep broke open, the water came shooting to the surface.
Fearmonger says r/that happened. No, I actually think that there's a fair chance that he had a lunch with Walt Brown. Because you gotta remember, there was a time when Kent Hovind was not the pariah that he is now, right? Like, the fact that he's currently, like, persona non grata in basically every young Earth creationist organization came after all the abuse allegations and convictions, and after, well, some of the, I guess, his criminal convictions for other things, but after the, you know, various abuse allegations, and after he continued to repeatedly go with arguments that most other creationists had long since abandoned as simply not accurate arguments, like too stupid even for creationists. So I think there's a pretty good chance that sometime in, like, the 80s or so, maybe even the 90s, that Walt Brown and Kent Hovind were on good enough terms that he could just call up Walt Brown and they could grab dinner in Phoenix. I think that's actually pretty plausible. Arathamian for $10 says, for all we know, gopher wood might have near infinite heat capacity and could effectively insulate the interior against a superheated plasma until the planet re-solidified. So you're saying it's basically aerogel. Which, I mean, can I prove that gopher wood isn't just the Hebrew term for aerogel? No, I cannot. Rail got to Bella for $2 says, but Dapper, you'd have access to so many knives. No, I'm not gonna. No, I wouldn't attack Kent Hovind with a knife. Look, Kent Hovind is an absolute horrible person. And I'm not, like, always on all cases against violence, but he's not, like, killing people directly. He's not, like, a threat to, like national security or whatever. Most of the people who are his victims because of choices they made, which is not the same thing as, you know, going around attacking people. And also, I feel like I've said this a few times. I don't know if I have during this show, but I spent a good 4 years being a party to just the death of so many people, almost all of whom had no good reason to be killed. That was while I was in the military. I'm done with that. I would prefer to just not ever be party to anyone directly dying ever again if I can help it. Now, that's not to say I wouldn't, you know, use whatever force necessary to, like, save someone's life if they're right in front of me or something. But, like, yeah, I think I've had my fill of being a part of people's death. Yeah, I did enough of it. I did far too much of it, actually. So, yeah. And yes, this is in fact me being anti-war. I'm not a big fan. So there you go.
Surface from these subterranean water chambers. As the water came shooting up, the layer under, you got a layer of rock, layer of water, another layer underneath, which is actually a layer of basalt. Basalt is...
Okay, so why would there be a layer of basalt? Like, the crust doesn't just have a layer of basalt underneath the granite on the continental shelves. And then the ocean crust, which is mostly basalt, doesn't have, like, its own extra layer. Like, where is either Walt or Kent getting this? I'm very confused as to where they're getting that there's a basalt layer. Like, why would it be a basalt? Wouldn't it be, like, gabbro? Well, then I guess if God just pooped it into existence, it could be whatever he wants, I guess. Sure. I'm trying to think about this like there's any actual like logical flow to like how rocks form or anything. And then I realized, no, this is all just created by a conjuration spell in their idea. There was no like history to any of these rocks. God was just like, basalt! And now there's basalt, so I don't have to worry about how it formed, I guess. Silly me thinking that this is an idea that could be, you know, thought about in a logical manner. I'm taking a drink for I just can't. My brain is gonna fry.
Like lava hardens into a substance called basalt. It's coming from a...
Well, some lava does. Other lavas cool into other things because not all lavas have the same chemical composition. So, like, you know, some lava might cool into rhyolite. But whatever.
melted rock. That basalt would lift up in the crack, and the crack would get wider, and the crust would actually slide off.
Why would the basalt lift up if the granitic part of the crust breaks and then starts falling down as the water shoots up? What's the force that's pushing the basalt up? Can you think of a force that would do that, Ben? Because I sure can't.
No, I'm having trouble following Kent with this.
All right, so the basic idea is, for some reason, the obvious reason being that this is a completely unstable system, the granite, which is on top, cracks, right? And so it goes granite, water, basalt.
Okay.
So the granite cracks and starts falling as the water is forced up. But then apparently, according to Kent, something is also forcing the basalt up. I don't know what that would be.
Yeah, I don't know.
Explaining why, in some places of the world, we find wrinkled mountains. These are up in British Columbia, Canada. If you take a piece of carpeting and start pushing it...
But... Okay. A lot of the... Okay, so this is folded rock, right? This is a real thing. Part of the problem is that if you're going to explain this in terms of rapidly uplifting basalt, one, if it's going to rapidly uplift, it's not going to plastically deform. It's going to crack, right? Because rocks are brittle. You don't, generally, if you pull on a rock too fast, it's just going to break. Now, under high pressure and high temperatures and over a long period of time, you can get brittle things to plastically deform, right? But the time isn't an inessential thing here. And second, most of the folded rocks that we have that are just visible on the surface of the Earth are both sedimentary and igneous rocks, which cannot be explained this way. So this doesn't actually fix anything. And I think he's going to say that this is how the Himalayas formed, with this upthrust of basalt. But the Himalayas are primarily made of marine sedimentary rock. And evaporites. I mean, there's a lot of evaporites there, too. Not primarily igneous. So this doesn't work at all, right? If what Kent is saying was the actual explanation for things like the Himalayas, you'd actually just have a bunch of, like, heavily fractured basalt piled up. But that's not what the Himalayas are. Got a couple super chats here. For $4.99, Kent Professional Ice Dome Miner Halstead says, underneath the basalt is the candy corn layer, and under that is the second subterranean ocean, and under that is the helium layer, and under that is the... You're gonna like the next video that I put out, because I have a stream of consciousness that's very similar to that thing, in response to a creationist just making up wild crap. Carnival Frog for $5 says, hoo-hoo, catching a live stream with a Mothra, a Ghidorah, and a Godzilla, and this is their 5th super chat. Thank you so much. Here's a drink. And then let us change the counter here up to 30%. And then Carnival Frog gifted 10 memberships. Thank you so much. That's extremely generous, and it brought us to 42% of the way to Fancy Avatar, which is more than 42% of the way to Kent gets free pizza. But here's 10 drinks. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay. Oh, that was a bit. Here we go.
Across the floor until you hit the wall, and you keep pushing. The carpet wrinkles, right?
Atomic Squirrel for $5 says the rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Well, that's good. I would not have wanted to hear that you had in fact died. That would suck. So I'm glad that you are in fact around. Yeah. I want my audience to be alive. Mostly because, like, it turns out it's really hard to watch YouTube when you're dead.
That's the rumor I've heard.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, like, I get the demographics on my like YouTube analytics. And like all of them have like age limits, but there's not even a section for dead, so I just assume that no one's who's dead is watching. I don't know. Maybe there's an afterlife, and maybe people are watching from the afterlife. If so, hey guys, I'm assuming up is the direction to look for the afterlife. I don't know. Maybe it's down. Hey guys. Maybe that's what hell is having to watch Diaper Dinosaur videos for eternity.
We find mountains that are obviously compressed from the end.
I mean, he's right about that. That is, in fact, what we find all over the place. That's true. Of course, the thing that he's forgetting is that means that that's going to mean that if there was water between those two parts of the land where the mountains are compressing and pushing up, then that's going to push up any fossils from the ocean up to the heights like in Everest, which means that you don't actually need to have a flood to explain Everest. You just need the crumpling of the rocks. And the fact that they're so smoothly folded means that they couldn't have happened that quickly in the course of, like, less than a year. Which means we need time for this to happen. See, this is one of the things about creation, young Earth creationists in particular, right? Is that a lot of their explanations are like, well, that's possible, but you don't have enough time for it to happen, right? Like their explanation for the Grand Canyon is basically that it was like flood runoff that carved it in the course of, like, at most a few decades after the flood. But that's not enough time to lithify that sediment. And we can tell that the canyon was carved through already lithified sediment because unlithified sediment has a different repose angle than hard rock does. Hard rock can have a repose angle that's almost 90 degrees. And that's what you find at the Grand Canyon. Like, Ben, you've been there. There were a lot of really sheer layers of rock there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like, the kind of thing you would need specialized equipment to climb.
I would never climb, no matter what the equipment was.
That's fair. But, like, even an experienced rock climber would probably not free climb a lot of those things.
No, not a chance.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that.
And that's not possible if what you're carving through is unlithified mud, basically. And so, like, even though the explanation of, like, oh, it's flood runoff, I'm like, okay, I could buy that flood runoff could carve a big channel in the earth. It wouldn't look like the Grand Canyon, whatever. But fundamentally, the Grand Canyon could not have been carved in soft mud. That takes time. It takes time for these things to turn into rock. And that's one of the things that creationists never really appreciate, is how much time things take. And they're like, oh, well, it could just be a lot of water in a little time. No, it couldn't. That's not an option that we have. We know how time and amount of water affect things like erosion. We know how time and pressure and temperature affect things like rock folding. We've done this experimentally. The main experiments that established the laws, like the actual mathematical principles that we use to calculate things, like when rocks will fold rather than crack and how long it takes, that was established way back in, like, the 1940s with actual laboratory experiments where they just heated rocks and put them under a lot of pressure, both, like, vertical and lateral, to compress them into folds. Like, we did the actual laboratory experiment. We know what it takes. And it's just so frustrating, because another thing, of course, is that creationists don't do their own experiments. They don't have a sedimentation lab to demonstrate they can get limestone to layer into, like, 500-foot thick layers and then solidify in the span of less than a year. They're not doing that. They're not doing their own confinement experiments with rocks to see how folding can happen. They're the closest we can get to creationists doing an experiment that I even know of right now is either grabbing a bunch of character traits from evolutionary literature, scientific literature, and then plugging them into a fake baraminological study that gets you nonsense answers, or like ICR raising Mexican cave tetras for some reason and then being super impressed when they get a tan. Okay, Like, I don't even know what to do with those. Carnival Frog for $20 says, celebrating being granted tenure this week, Godzilla. Thanks for being a great source of sanity in an insane world. Well, first of all, congratulations on tenure. That is awesome. I'll take a drink for that. I would love everyone in the chat to congratulate Carnival Frog, because that is an accomplishment. That is not easy to do, and it is a big deal. And quite frankly,
Congratulations.
yeah. Also, quite frankly, the fact that like actual academics watch and appreciate this channel means I'm doing something right. Because this channel is primarily, you know, a science communication channel. And if people who do science stuff are like, yeah, this is a good channel, that means I'm getting it right more often than I'm getting it wrong. And I do make mistakes. Do not be afraid to call me out on them. Now, I will ask that you back up your evidence of my mistake, and I still may end up saying, I'm not sure you're right. But very often, I think most people can attest. If I think that I indeed screwed it up and you have a good reason to say so, I'll agree with you. Roshina Sports Style Radio Star Killer for $4.99 says, sheer and sexy layers of rock at the Grand Canyon. You know what? Yes, the Grand Canyon has some of the sexiest rocks. If I were ever going to be physically attracted to rocks, it would probably be the rocks of the Grand Canyon. Actually, I did see a graph today that I was like, wow, that is a surprisingly sexy graph. It was a graph of Tesla stock values going down. And I was like, you know, if I were ever going to be aroused by a graph, it's in the running. And then that was shared to me by Chesh, and she just said, right? Like, yeah. So it's a pretty sexy graph there. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you ever feel like you really need to seduce Dapper Dinosaur, just show me lots of graphs of Elon Muscolini losing money.
These weren't just lifted up, they're compressed. If the crust of the Earth is sliding off of a rising mid-Atlantic ridge, it's sliding into what? I mean, it's not a vacuum out there. It has to eventually, something's crumbling. If the crust is moving anywhere, something else is either crushing or being subducted.
Okay. But that's not any of the mountain chains that are currently around. Like, what plate is to the west of like the North American and the Atlantic? Sorry, not the Atlantic. The South American plate to the west of it.
I don't know the names of the plates.
This one's a pretty obvious name.
I'm sorry.
It's one of the biggest plates. It's named after one of the biggest oceans.
The Pacific plate.
Yes!
I guessed right. Yay.
Okay, so what's to the east of like the Eurasian plate and the Indian Ocean plate?
The Australian plate.
Okay, well, but also northeast of that.
I don't know. Just tell me.
You already said it.
Pacific plate still?
Yes. Now, you might or might not know this, but tectonic plates are largely divided into continental versus oceanic. Continental plates tend to be mostly granite, and oceanic plates tend to be mostly basalt. Now, which one of those do you think might the Pacific plate be?
Basalt.
Right, because it's an ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's oceanic plate. So it's mostly going to be oceanic crust, so basalt.
I got one right. You're right. Nice.
Which means that the spreading at the mid-Atlantic ridge is primarily causing subduction. Have you ever heard the term the Ring of Fire?
I've heard the term.
Not in
It's
terms of the
song.
Johnny Cash song, no, like the
from
geography
Spicy
thing.
Food.
Well, there's that.
No,
This is the geography
I
thing.
haven't.
So it turns out that along the west coast of the Americas and along the east coast of Asia, and then going into like a lot of little oceanic islands, there's like a reason why like Polynesia is a thing. There's a lot of volcanoes. And these volcanoes are in fact caused by the subduction of the Pacific plate under things like the Eurasian plate and the North and South American plate. So, okay, well, Jillian Mixmaster Jeans Rensar says, well, where I live, the plate to the west is the Juan de Fuca plate. Okay, well, yes, there is more to this than is, you know, I am simplifying a bit and ignoring very small plates like the Juan de Fuca plate. But it is indeed a tectonic plate. It is valid. It is real, and I'm sure that it is to the west of you. Is it related to Great Balls of Fire? No. Although I do see why you would say that. So the Ring of Fire is often sometimes called the Pacific Ring of Fire. Yeah, it's the fact that a huge portion the volcanoes of the planet, encircle the land around the Pacific. And it's because of this subduction. So no, nothing is crumbling, by and large, because of the spread of the mid-Atlantic ridge. Which also creates a problem for this, right? Because a lot of the current mountains that are the result of actual uplift as a result of the collision of tectonic plates are actually not associated with any kind of oceanic ridge that's currently spreading. So, like, that doesn't work, especially since, remember, Kent thinks that what the ridges are the seams where the crust broke open to release the oceans from below the Earth. So if that's also his explanation for orogenies that result in folded mountains like the Himalayas, well, we don't actually have associated ridges opposite that motion. And also, remember, the Appalachian Mountains in North America, the Atlas Mountains in Africa, and the Scottish Highlands are also the same kind of folded mountain. They're just heavily eroded. What ridge caused that? We don't have one. So his explanation for this does not account for the vast majority of the things it's supposed to explain, which means it's not a good explanation for the orogenies that result in folded mountain. An orogeny is just a fancy geology term for a thing that causes a mountain. Hillhugger, who's been a member for 30 months and is at the tetrapod level, says, I like spicy food. The Ring of Fire, not so much. It's gonna get stronger colons, or I don't know. Yeah, stronger colons. Mixie for $5 says, as a Ring of Fire resident, thanks. I love hearing about the tectonics affecting my home. I mean, it's a big deal. If you live in a country that's heavily affected by like sort of like peri-Pacific volcanism, it is a major fact of life, right? Like, you ever notice that a lot of Japanese movies have a volcano? Yeah, that's because there's a lot of volcanoes there. That's why Godzilla's always hiding in volcanoes, and they're always digging up Mothra from volcanoes. Because it's a big deal over there. That's also why there's so many hot springs in places like that. It's where you get those Japanese macaques that love to hang out in the hot springs like it's a hot tub during the winter. You get all those cool like videos of them just kind of lounging around in the hot spring while the snow falls around them. And I'm like, you know what, monkey? That's also what I would do if I were in the winter in Japan. I get you. You know what? Yeah, I get it.
Okay, that is can't work any other way. In Yellowstone, of course, they have geysers shooting hot water up. I've been to all kinds of places where there's geysers in Calistoga, California, where they have Old Faithful. I don't know, probably 20 geysers are in the world named Old Faithful.
Is that true? I don't actually know. I only know of the one. Let me know. Are there other Old Faithfuls? Because, I mean, it doesn't seem ridiculous. You know how many cities are called London? So many.
Everybody has an Old Faithful. But are there any in Southern California, Daniel? Geysers or hot springs? Well, isn't 29? Yeah. That's right. They got one there at Murrieta Springs. That's right. Okay. That was cool. When at the top, it's like 120 degrees if you want to get in that spa, and as it goes down, it gets a little cooler. It was pretty slick. Oh, Chuck Smith did that. Anyway, these hot water coming out of the ground would kill the diatoms. Now, diatoms are...
I entirely forgot we were talking about diatoms at all. Oh, I don't know if that's Kent's fault or it's my fault. It doesn't really matter. I forgot this had anything to do with diatoms, but here is a cool thing. You can actually look at the diatoms and other sort of like shell-bearing microbes that are oceanic through the fossil record, and you can see huge amounts of evolution that are traced in exacting detail, because a lot of these animals have their shells, or tests more properly, made out of things like silica, which is basically what sand is. So they're like pre-fossilized, right? Because how much more mineralized are you going to get than just being made out of like silica crystals? That's just a rock, right? So, as a result, yeah, they tend to just preserve in the billions across huge vertical swaths. And as you go up through that vertical column, all with the diatoms and other kinds of test-bearing algae and whatnot, you can like watch evolution happen in these beautiful, complete series of gradualistic changes where you can watch species split as they might do some kind of niche partitioning or something, and you can watch the different shapes evolve with different kind of spikes and horns and crenellations and all this stuff. And it is one of the best examples of transition seen in the fossil record. But the problem is, no one goes to the museum to look at the diatoms or like anything like that, right? Like, Bent, you've been to national or natural history museums, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever go and try to see where like the algae exhibit was?
No, I didn't, and I never accidentally walked past it either.
Yeah, you went to look at like dinosaur bones or like mammoths or elephants. Yeah. Yeah. That's the problem. Creationists don't actually care about the evolution that's observable in things like diatoms in the fossil record because they're not charismatic, right? Like, there's a reason that no one's like, oh, we have to save the insert endangered species of microscopic algae here. Instead of like, well, we have to save the polar bear because polar bears are charismatic, right? And so some of the most amazing aspects of the fossil record in terms of evolutionary biology and the evidence for evolution are in places where creationists just don't care. And they're never going to be impressed by this. In fact, I saw that when I had my chat with Rebecca, who, don't get me wrong, Rebecca's great. Just wonderful person, has been exceedingly kind to everyone I've ever seen her or known of her to interact with, including myself. But when she's like, well, I want to see macroevolution. And we presented her, like, algae becoming multicellular in a lab as a result of selection pressure. Just didn't care. And I think part of the reason was because she didn't care about algae. They're not charismatic enough. So, but it turns out that in terms of biology, they're both very important. And also, the fact that you can watch them evolve is just as much a piece of evolution as watching, say, like, the true species of Triceratops evolve from one to the other in the fossil record. No less impressive, no less evidence.
Gorgeous under the microscope, but you can't see them without a microscope.
All right, I'll agree with him there. That is true. They are gorgeous.
Critters that live in the water. Their body is made of glass.
Yep,
Silica.
it's basically true. Yeah, well, it's silica. You said, all right,
tiny,
take a drink.
When they die, they fall to the bottom, and you don't even notice them. The estimates are it may take about 1,000 years to get 1 inch of dead diatoms at the bottom of the ocean.
What he's describing is the accumulation of organic limestone, which is the vast majority of limestone. So, you see a problem with, like, it takes 1,000 years to get a 1/4 inch of limestone? Yeah. Hey, Ben, you've been to the Grand Canyon?
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that
Yes.
large, multi-100-foot sections of the Grand Canyon are, in fact, limestone? Like the red wall limestone?
Okay.
So if you get a 1/4 inch per millennium, seems like a bit of a problem for them all forming during the flood. Yeah, especially since... sorry.
There might be an issue with the time elapsed there.
And what if I told you that the calmer the water is, the faster things like diatoms and other organic bits they're going to leave behind limestone accumulate?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but that seems like a problem for a flood, which is supposed to be sloshing everything around, right?
Yeah, huge global flood with 1,000-mile-an-hour tidal waves. Is that what he said before?
I said like 400 foot tall. I don't know how fast they're supposed to go.
I remember they were really fast, faster than you might expect.
Yeah.
According to Kent.
Seems like a problem for depositing huge amounts of limestone, huh?
Very much so.
Oops.
They die, fall to the bottom. The kids die, fall to the bottom. The grandkids die and fall to the bottom. And you build up a layer of dead diatoms. Hey, Jeff, run out to building 4. When you first walk in the door, there are 2 boxes of diatomaceous earth. Bring that in, would you? Just grab one of them. One of them's open. You know what I'm talking about? It's a pretty good-sized box. Well, yeah, right. 5 feet to Veronica's cleaning the building out. Walk in the door, go straight ahead, 5 feet.
I want to point out, he knew what he was going to be talking about for this topic. He has all of this in slides and whatnot. He could have just had his own diatomaceous earth handy. Like, he could have. He's previously had lots of, like, physical objects handy. And also, this is the edited, right? Like, we've seen them take out a break where people went and got lunch or whatever. Kent, you could have cut this bit. Just saying, because it's adding nothing.
Feet, you'll see it. Okay. So grab one of those, would you? Diatomaceous earth, you can buy it at the hardware store. We'll bring a box of it in here. Is used for all sorts of things. It's real cheap. It is so tiny. you can spread this stuff around your house, and bugs breathe it into their skin and kills them.
Okay, well, one, bugs don't have skin in the way that, like, vertebrates do. They have spiracles, which are not made of skin. But, yeah, certain animals will have trouble if they inhale diatomaceous earth because it can be sharp, and it can cause little tiny lacerations. It's basically the same problem with breathing in asbestos, although not nearly as severe for most organisms. You get sharp little crystals, it'll cut you.
It's a perfectly natural insecticide.
As opposed to a supernatural insecticide. You gotta love those insect-killing ghosts.
I don't know of any bugs that can survive. There may be some, but I don't know of any that can survive diatomaceous earth. It's like extremely fine powder. When you feel this stuff, you just think it's like talcum powder or baby powder or something like that. You know, it's just really...
Yeah, Prixie Burning Purple also says, don't get that stuff on your skin. It will dry and irritate your skin. Yeah, wear gloves.
You'll find it's actually these little tiny crystals, if you could see them under the microscope. And they're really gorgeous, all different shapes, you know, cubes and squares and diamonds and triangles.
Yeah, and you can see that evolution. You know.
Diatomaceous earth is used for swimming pool filters. It's used for detergents to clean your clothes, for fertilizers, insulation, soundproofing, paper finishes. They will mix diatomaceous earth in with the slurry of wood chips.
I mean, he's right. We'll take a drink. I just
paper
don't
have a
know what the
slicker
point
surface.
is.
When they make paper, diatomaceous earth in there.
And Jillian Wren says, Zane appreciated that. Well, I'm happy to please, Zane.
Soundproofing, oil dry, paint thickeners, the polishes, cat litter.
Domesticated Oldest of the Jews Python for 100 Argentinian pesos says, diatomaceous earth is also great at preserving little aliens whose skulls look suspiciously like llama skulls. Oh, man. And then presenting them to the Mexican government for some reason, who apparently are, like, giving this a serious hearing in their legislature, which is like, I don't have anything against Mexico. I actually quite like Mexico, but, like, guys. Come on. There's no reason to show an obviously fake alien body to you guys. Like, you've got other things you could be worried about. Like, you know, running Mexico. Although I am, as time goes, becoming more and more of a fan of the current president of Mexico. She's, I'm kind of jealous of the Mexican president, as it turns out. Although I guess that's a pretty low bar right now.
You know, the white crystals you put out for the kitty, that's diatomaceous earth.
Roshina Schwarzschild Radio Star Killer for $4.99 says, diatomaceous earth has lots of uses, therefore God. Yeah, I don't even know if that's where he's going with this. I don't actually know what the point is of saying any of this. Like, diatomaceous earth is really cool. And... so...
paint removers and scores of other things. In Lompoc, California, so how far did you live from Lompoc? 35, 40 minutes.
Domesticated Oldness of the Juice Python says, Mexico didn't take them seriously. Malson was at the MC at an event and waited until the event was over to present the mummies. Alright, well that's not how it was presented to me in terms of like what I was seeing from like news coverage. So, okay, that's good. And he presented them in Peru and was laughed out of the Congress building. That's good. Alright, well in that case, sorry Mexican legislature. I feel like I had inaccurate reporting that was sent my way. And I'm glad that you were not taking this seriously. Like, the Mexican federal legislature is actually listening to me. Although, hey, you know what? Maybe some of them are. I don't know.
Yeah. Right on the San Andreas Fault. Yep. Welcome to Florida. Glad you're here. We get hurricanes here, but you can see them coming. The largest diatomaceous earth quarry in the world is in Lompoc, California. My understanding is they've been digging it there for quite a while. They think it may be 1,500 feet thick of this solid diatomaceous earth, which Jeff will bring in here if he can find it. You find one? Oh, look at that. Oh, hey, set that right up here. No, you don't need to bring both of them. We'll look at it here. Well, I'll bring the open one here. Yeah, we'll let the guys see what diatomaceous earth looks like. How much was this at the hardware store? I forget. Pool time.
It's not going to look like anything particularly special, but okay.
This is used for pool filters, but diatomaceous earth, get some out here.
Is he just going to reach in?
You can put it around your house for kill the bugs.
Yep.
There, Nick.
Take a drink. Hey, Ben, you know what PPE is?
Yes, I do.
This will be a great time for some PPE.
Personal protective equipment. Yes.
Mhm. Yep. And now he's going to pass it around, and everyone's going to get it on their hands.
It's a bad idea.
I'm just going to hit play, and we're just going to watch it happen. It's like a train wreck. It's just going to happen, and all we can do is watch.
Pass that around, let everybody feel some of that.
Jeez. Yeah, that's not a good idea either.
Very fine white powder. If you can see it under a good microscope.
I feel like Kent's the kind of guy who, if you said, hey, why don't you sniff this asbestos? He'd be like, okay. And he would just a whole bunch of asbestos. And then he'd have mesothelioma in a day.
That would be pretty fast.
Yeah, it would be very, very fast. It usually takes a lot longer. The Fearmonger points out, I don't think the guy who willingly consumes cyanide cares about PPE. That is
That's a good
depressingly
point.
true. Yeah. Jeez. This guy so much. And like, okay. At least if it were just him handling the diatomaceous earth, he'd only be causing problems for himself. But no. He's going to pass it around to the entire class. And like these guys, people in this class are probably not familiar with this stuff. They don't know it's dangerous. They don't know it's bad for you to handle. Although he did just say it kills insects, so you should probably get some kind of clue that it might be dangerous. Not everything that kills insects is dangerous to humans, but like the Venn diagram of kills insects and kills humans has a lot of overlap, you know?
Hey, Daniel.
And Joshua Geese for $5 says, I wonder if Kent has experience with other white powder. So I mostly believe Kent when he talks about like how straight-laced he is and how he's never like gotten high or been drunk or even had a drop of alcohol. Because there's this thing called credibility enhancing displays or costly signaling, right? And they're things that signal to your in-group that you are a member, and because they're costly, they are unlikely to be fake. And so one of them, for Kent's group of Christians, is not consuming any kind of mind-altering substances, even to the point of alcohol. And so I do think that Kent, as in an effort to ingratiate himself with that particular kind of Christian, at the very least has not ever publicly had alcohol or any other drugs. And I suspect he probably hasn't privately, because that continues the credibility-enhancing display. And Kent clearly engages in some credibility-enhancing display for a particular group of Christians. So I do think that he's probably right, or he's probably honest about that. Let's see. Dutch Mammoth never saw Snow Tunicate for $2 says, you think Kent would ever do that with Lunar Regolith? Just handle it? Yeah, probably. It would probably be really bad for him. Because Lunar Regolith is also sharp and jagged. Because what's rounding off the Regolith? Sunlight? It's not very effective. And then Sean, the 21st century viewer of this channel for $10 says, the reason he's saying so many facts about the Earth is so the listeners think he must know a lot about it to know this much. Okay. So when he says the wrong thing, they assume he's right. Yeah, I think there's actually something to that. I think that might be the case. And then Roshina Schwarzschild Radio Star Killer for $4.99 says, Kent, after licking asbestos fibers, it feels like cotton candy. He probably would too.
By Marlissa's desk, up on the shelf up high, is a big block of diatomaceous earth, extremely fragile. Bring that in here, would you?
Why would you put something like that above your daughter's desk? What is... I'm taking a drink. What is happening right now?
And then call it extremely fragile and then say, bring it on in. As if that's a good idea.
Can you see why Marlissa never ever talks to Kent anymore?
Yeah, I'm starting to see that.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, it's like packed talcum powder.
Yeah, except it's sharp. And it's actually much, much harder. Because talcum powder is powdered talc, one of the softest things that, like, stays solid. And so even if you break it off sharp, it'll almost immediately weather down to being smooth after it comes into contact with almost anything. But that's not true for diatoms, which are made of silica, which even if it breaks into sharp, jagged bits. Okay. I'm gonna hit play. This is the first time he's actually just endangered his audience directly. And, like, granted, it's probably not, like, with a fatal thing, but, like, it's not going to be fun. Your hands will dry out. They might crack a bit. They're probably going to hurt.
I normally don't put that on display because it'll crumble in a hurry.
So then...
But we'll get that here. When I was in Lompoc, California, several years ago, I toured this diatomaceous earth quarry. And they showed me how they dig this stuff out.
Did you have to wear an air filtration mechanism, Kent? Because I bet you did. Which might give you a clue.
With bulldozers. I mean, it's 1,500 feet thick. And it's rock, but it's extremely soft rock. You know, much softer than chalk. You can just pick it up and just take it with your hand and just crush the rock, you know, to powder like this. Feels weird, doesn't it? Like real small. What happens is, each of those crystals is so small, it absorbs a lot of water or liquid. They'll use this stuff for antacid. I believe that's what they use in antacid.
No. No one is chewing diatomaceous earth. It's primarily calcium carbonate, and it's originally from natural chalk, although I suspect now a lot of it's actually just artificially produced calcium carbonate. Or bicarbonate, whatever. It's not diatoms, Kent. It's chalk. They're not the same thing. Taking a drink. Also, the method of action for antacids isn't that they absorb the acid, because then the acid would just still be in your esophagus. How would that help? Now you just get a big chunk of diatoms clogging up your esophagus that also have a bunch of acid in them? No, the method of action by an antacid is that it neutralizes the acid by having a high pH, whereas the acid has a low pH. And when you mix something that's acidic with something that's alkaline, they cancel each other out and produce water and some kind of salt. Because you can basically define salt as what happens when you mix an alkaline substance with an acid, and, like, the product that isn't water is by definition a salt.
Tablets, you know, because when you swallow it, the powder breaks apart, and each little bit absorbs just simple surface tension, attracts a whole bunch of acid from your stomach.
No.
By the way, antacids are the wrong way to treat stomach acid, but that gets in a whole other subject.
Is the right way cyanide, Kent? Is that the right way? Because I promise, if you eat enough cyanide, you won't have acid problems. I don't know, Bent, have you talked to your doctor about that? Like, maybe, instead of...
That's a good idea.
Yeah, just talk about copious amounts of cyanide. So it'll...
I'll insist on it and see what he says.
Yeah.
In Bible and health. We'll get into that some other time. When I was there, Lompoc, California is just right smack on top of the San Andreas Fault. I think it runs right through the middle of the town. Matter of fact, the San Andreas...
Roshna Schwarzschild Radio Star Killer for $9.99 says, diatomite produced for pool filters is treated with high heat, calcination, and fluxing agents, soda ash, causing the formerly harmless amorphous silicon dioxide to assume its crystalline form. Formerly hazardous. That sounds dangerous. Look, we've seen a lot on Kent with Ben, right? We've seen Kent say some unfathomably stupid things. We've seen him recommend things that are dangerous, but I think this is the first time where we've actually seen him directly put his class students, whatever, like, in harm's way. We're like, hey, do this thing that is dangerous and harmful. That's a new one here. Becca just, is he trying to kill all of his followers? It seems like, yeah, maybe low-key he's actually trying to kill his followers. I mean, heck, remember, one of his big things is he wants to get as many people to heaven as possible. And if they get to heaven as a result of him, causing their death, that means they didn't have a chance to, like, unchristian themselves. And he said he is a once saved, always saved guy. But I think he's also one of those people who's like, oh, if you left Christianity, that means you never really had faith in the first place. Which is, one, really, really dumb. And two, a wonderful get-out-of-jail-free card for any theological problems that once saved, always saved has with former Christians. But it is possible that maybe there is something there. It's like, oh, if I kill them all now, I can convert a whole bunch more. If they die while they're still Christians, I'm golden. Because remember, he has repeatedly said that one of his goals is to get a better reward, more crowns in heaven. Because Ken thinks that the more people he converts and thereby gets into heaven, the better his reward is going to be. So, I mean, he's even doing all of his ministry stuff for selfish reasons, right? Yeah. Which, I don't know. I feel like, was Jesus all about the whole selfishness thing? Was that his shtick?
Didn't seem like it.
No, it didn't.
It seemed like he said to love your neighbor and even to love your enemies. Which doesn't sound selfish to me.
It doesn't to me either. But then again, you know what? I've met a lot of selfish Christians, so maybe we're just wrong about that.
It's possible.
Andreas Fault does. At diatomaceous earth quarry, Lompoc, California, a remarkable discovery was made during mining operations in 1976. Workers at the Dicalcite division of Grefco Corporation uncovered the fossil skeleton of a baleen whale, along with trillions of fish fossils.
Okay.
The whale fossil is standing on end in the quarry.
I'm familiar with the story. It wasn't standing on end. It was at about a 30-degree angle because of this thing called uplift. The actual strata it was in were also at a 30-degree angle. So, okay. If the strata are at a 30-degree angle or so, and there's a fossil inside the strata at about a 30-degree angle, and we know that all things being equal, sedimentation tends to happen horizontally, but that uplift can push things up so that they're no longer horizontal. The parsimonious explanation for this is that the whale was in fact horizontal when it died and sank to the bottom and was then subsequently covered by more horizontal layers. Because remember, this is supposed to be one of those upright fossils or polystrate fossils, but it isn't polystrate. It's not through multiple strata. The strata themselves are aligned to the facing of the whale.
It is about 80 feet long. Now, some have argued, well, yeah, but the layers are tilted also. I understand. Okay.
That's important, Kent! That's important! That removes the entire point of you saying this is a polystrate fossil, which is the only thing you're going for. Taking another drink. And we're not going to continue. We're going to back up a little bit next time, and we're going to get to the whole vertical whale fossil, because at least I'll have a little bit of time. I might actually look up the story, get the numbers a little bit more right, because, I'm just trying to go off of the top of my head. Which means I don't think I'm going to be forced back into this stuffy uniform next time, which is okay by me, because it's not the most comfortable thing. But I do wear it for you guys, because I know that you do sometimes appreciate it. Plus, let's get these zippers. Okay. Do a little tease. Anyway. But what do you got coming up here in the next week or so that you might want people to know about?
Nothing at all. All right, let me think. No, there's nothing.
Okay. Melody says, make sure to drink plenty of water. Hangovers are not fun. Do not worry. I plan to drink a whole bunch of water, both after this show, and then also my plan is to do audio recording later tonight, where I will also drink plenty of water. Yeah, so I don't actually expect a hangover tomorrow. I don't normally have hangovers on Wednesday, although it has happened. There was one time I drank wine for Kent with Bent, and oh my goodness, did I have a hangover the next day. It was the first and last time I ever did wine for the show. It was like,
And that gives a nasty hangover.
Yeah, I've since done like a little bit of like champagne for like New Year's streams and stuff like that, but like that's still just like over the course of 4 hours, I have like 4 little glasses of wine. So. All right, well, what's coming up on this channel? Let me open up my YouTube studio so I can take a look. So, on Thursday, we have Mexican Cavefish Debunk Natural Selection, which you remember earlier, I was talking about one of the only experiments I know of is ICR raising Mexican cave tetras for some reason. So that's going to be about that. That's with Randy Galuza. Roshino for $4.99 says, have Bent unzip you sensually. I don't think Bent's up for that, at least not for $4.99.
Sorry, no thank you.
How much would it cost, though?
I'll have to think about that.
Okay.
Get back to you.
I mean, I'm sure there's a price. Like, if someone was like, would you unzip
$1,000?
$1,000? Okay. All right.
$1,000.
Super chat $1,000, guys, and maybe we can get that. Although that might have to be on a different channel. So let's see. That's on Thursday. That is at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Then on Friday, over on Top Hats Off, the current plan is that I'm going to do some art for an upcoming game. It might be the a one-shot that I'm working on. It could also be Star Trek Endurance. I'm not sure. I still do have some work for Star Trek Endurance to do. So I'm not positive there, but there will be an art stream there at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Then on Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, we will be doing Dapper Reacts. We'll be back to Bodhi with Kip. Oh, no, not Kip. Kip will be at a convention but with Vishanti. So no Kip, but Vishanti. And then on Tuesday, we will be doing another Kent with Bent, but it will be at 6 p.m. Pacific because the time is changing that Sunday for everyone but us in like North America. So it's changing for at least for the former US and Canada. I don't know about Mexico. But I don't often make calls to Mexico, so I don't keep track of when they do their clocks, whereas I do frequently contact people in Canada. So, you know. I say that like people in Canada. It's Kip and Chesh. That's who I frequently contact in Canada. So, yeah, the time for this show will be changing a little bit because this show is always at 6 p.m. Fence time. So, yeah. And yeah, we'll be doing another one. I don't know what the title is going to be, but I will say I won't be wearing this. So, all right. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. If you are interested, we will be doing 4 episodes of Power Rangers Dino Charge over on the Discord. So please come hang out for that. It'll be fun. And Bent, if you could write down 5739, that would be great.
Already done, my friend.
Awesome. All right, well, with that, everybody, I hope you all, once again, have a safe rest of your week, as much of a fun rest of your week as possible. And remember, there are no winners in a trade war. Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bent Hovind, Ferrevara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Max Cherry, North Texas Fossils, John Ackerman, Strawberry Vein, Dr. Tapioca Weasel, Elleron Teller, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostek von Mennen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, Sphincter of Doom, and Volus. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.